everyone. Saeed here with Psychology Spirituality in collaboration with the Muslim Vibe. We're here, ISNA 2018. Very happy to be sitting with a comedian, Amer Zahr. We want to get a little bit about his experiences here at ISNA. Also, just how the world of comedy relates to our experiences as Muslims, and maybe share some stories of how you got into comedy in the first place.
Sure.
So right off the bat, very active Palestinian comedian. Lots of your stories revolve around the experiences of being Arab and an Arab American.
Yeah.
Also, all the little nuances. So what are some things that happened in your childhood, or situations or moments that kind of geared you towards the life of a comedian?
Sure. I mean, you look, as Arabs, as Muslims, as Palestinians, we all have stories to tell, right? Yeah. Especially Palestinians. I mean, we have long stories to tell about our history and our struggle and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, for me, I use comedy as my form of activism. You know, I use humor to tell our story. A lot of times people say to me, you know, you're a comedian, I never know if you're being serious or not being serious. You know, comedians don't lie. We use humor to tell the truth. You know, we don't use humor to lie. We use humor to tell the truth.
Modern day philosophers.
Yeah, right. So we're always telling the truth.
Yeah.
I learned that if you make people laugh, they listen to you. Yeah. And so when we want to tell our stories, comedy is a very, very effective tool to do that. And so I actually started doing comedy while I was in law school at the University of Michigan, and they were bringing a comedian there, and the Arab student organization there was bringing a comedian, and they kind of put out a call that if anybody wants to just get on and fill some stage time, because they needed to fill some stage time. So I got up, I told a couple stories about my dad, everybody laughed, and I was like, man, this is pretty cool. And then I just kept doing it, and I did shows for free for like 5 years before anybody paid me anything. And now it's my full-time profession. I'm doing it all the time. I love it. I travel all around the world. I just got back from Palestine 5 days ago. I am now in Houston here at ISNA. Tomorrow I'm flying to Dubai.
Awesome.
So, you know, this is what I do now with my life.
It beats the law school, huh?
It beats the life of all my friends that I went to law school with. They're not happy. So, you know, I get to tell jokes. They pay me to tell jokes. It's a pretty good life.
Yeah, I read this really interesting psychological article talking about the things that people do to overcome trauma. And it was actually based in the Gaza conflict. And they said that people use humor and happiness. That's a really, really major facet of, you know, what people do to try to help themselves to overcome stress. Can you speak a little bit about comedy in Palestine and in that region of the world, and how they accept comedy?
Well, as a general matter, comedy is tragedy repackaged, right? It's or at least some of the most effective forms of comedy. Yeah. And comedy is a form of protest, right? It's something we use to talk to power. It's something we use to point out the sort of like ridiculousness in society, and in Palestine there's a lot of that. You know, I always say that, you know, just in normal life, probably 5 or 10 funny things happen to you every day. If you live in Palestine, it's probably more like 100 funny, crazy things happen to you every day. We've all seen somebody laugh so much they start crying.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you can also see somebody crying so much they start laughing.
Wow.
So the emotions are not that different. You know, these are emotions that are very closely linked to each other. So Palestinians, we've been using art for a long time to talk about our struggle, whether it's poetry or art, you know, drawing, painting. Now we're starting to use comedy as well to talk about our struggle, and it's a very effective vehicle because it's therapeutic for the audience. Like if I'm performing in front of a Palestinian audience, I'm saying stuff and they're getting it, and it's just like a big therapy session. It's very cathartic for everybody. But if I'm doing it in front of a non-Palestinian or a non-Arab audience, it's also therapeutic for me, and they're learning.
Yes.
And since they're learning through comedy, they're much more likely to take it and much more likely to retain it, right? Because comedy is also really humanizing, right? Yeah. If you can laugh and show someone you can laugh, you become sort of more of a human being to them. And as Palestinians, as Arabs, as the Muslim community, that's one of our biggest struggles, right? So I use comedy to humanize us, to talk about us. My first job is to make people laugh, though, right? If I don't make people laugh, I'm not achieving any of the things that I want to achieve. So that is what I'm trying to do through my comedy, and point out some of the hypocrisy and ridiculousness of the world that we live in.
I mean, comedy is the great equalizer. Laughing is the great equalizer. Regardless of what your skin color is, what your religious orientation is, if you can sit down with someone and laugh, you're making so much common ground.
Yeah, we're not the first community to do it. I mean, the African-American community made amazing strides in this country after comedy became a central part of what they do. And look, as Palestinians, as Arabs, as Muslims, we have many ways in which, we have professors who are using academia to get our word out. Yeah. We have poets, we have activists. I'm a comedian. I'm part of this whole mosaic of different forms of activism we got going on. So, but I just found that it's really, really effective. If you can do it right and hit people in the right way, they just retain it a lot more through comedy.
I agree with that. Being someone who's a university student, we've seen kind of a shift in comedy. We've had a couple of comedians on our campus who refused to come to events or have called out of events due to this kind of politically correct nature that's been going on.
Yeah.
Do you feel that when comedy goes wrong, is that even a term, comedy going wrong? Are there topics that are too taboo for comedians to speak about? What do you feel about the shift that in these past?
So I don't think there's any topic that it's too taboo to talk about, but it's all about how you do it, right? Okay. So the job of a comedian is to challenge the audience, but without offending them, right? Because if you offend them, you lose them. But if you can challenge them, it's okay to make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah. But if you challenge them, that's good. If you offend them, then you didn't really achieve anything, right? I mean, if you're a comedian, and I have a lot of comedian friends who won't go to college campuses anymore because they think it's too, this whole millennial thing has taken over, so people are too scared. But you don't have to shock people. You don't have to go to a crowd and say, okay, I just want to say whatever I want to say, okay? I mean, comedy is an exercise in free speech, but free speech doesn't have to be offensive to make the point. If my objective is to make a point to get people to see the world through my eyes, see my point of view of the world, then I might do that differently in a comedy club than I would at an ISNA conference. Right? But just because I'm doing it differently at an ISNA conference doesn't mean I'm compromising my art or anything like that, right? As long as I'm not staying away from certain topics, right? I can talk about the same topic, but do it in a way that I know the crowd will take, right? Yeah. So then I would in, let's say, a comedy club or some other place. Yeah. So I think it's important. I go to college campuses all the time. Okay. And I'll tell jokes about race and sometimes you find the college students are like, they don't know if it's okay to laugh, but I just keep doing it, and a few minutes later, okay, they laugh, and they start to get it. So I think it's important, it's important to perform on college campuses. We can't have this, it's not okay to talk about certain things. This is part of the problem, when they are now telling right-wing people not to come to college campuses and all that kind of stuff, that's terrible. I mean, I think bring them and protest them, and bring them and show and let them talk. I believe in the idea that get all the ideas out there, and the dumb ones will get rooted out. But you don't censor ideas. And so comedy though is one of these places where, it's an art form. You have to be able to see your audience. I don't decide what's funny. The audience decides what's funny, right? And so that is something that every comedian has to sort of walk that line in front of certain audiences. But you have to respect your audience, or else, what are you doing?
Free speech is unanimous across the board.
Of course.
Or at least it should be. The last thing I would love to hear from you is the shift that you've seen being on the forefront of Muslim comedy in this country. Have you seen this tidal wave? We see lots of Hassan Minhaj and all of these Muslim comedians becoming really prominent. What's the shift that you've seen? What do you see Muslim comedy as being in the future of this country? Do you see the acceptance of the mainstream public of our point of view? I mean, look,
here's what we know. When we as whether we're Palestinian or Arab or Muslim or whatever we are, when we're doing comedy about culture, so our parents speak funny, our food smells funny, our names sound funny around white people, all that kind of stuff, that gets you to a certain point, and it's funny in front of our community and sort of funny in front of people who aren't from our community. But when you decide to take the next step and use comedy as a form of protest, and use comedy to show that we can be oppositional and still be American and still be comfortable, I did a whole show talking about how much Arabs love America because we're so scared. We love America so much that we do the national anthem at every Arab event all the time, even though we don't speak English, and all this kind of stuff. But I end it with saying, you know, we love America, but we need America to love us back.
Yes.
You know, that's the problem that we have. So we have to start using comedy to be more oppositional. So I'm not interested anymore in listening to Arab or Muslim comedians talk about just culture and really vanilla stuff. It's interesting, but we have to move past that.
Okay.
We need to get to the point where we're using art to be oppositional. Because we as a community have a problem where we're not that comfortable being oppositional. We're afraid that if we say something against the government, they're going to round us all up and put us all in Guantanamo Bay or send us all back to our countries. And, you know, maybe that'll happen. But if that happens, then at least we'll go down fighting on our moral principles. And so we should be using comedy to be oppositional, just like the black community did, just like the Latino community did, to really make our mark in America as strong Americans, but people who are comfortable speaking truth to power.
What's some advice you can give to some young Muslims watching who may be interested in pursuing comedy? Is it as easy as what you did? Just find your local open mic and try out and really start refining your material? And
I mean, look, the keys to being a good comedian, I think, are being vulnerable and honest and transparent with your audience. If you're willing to do these things, then you can get out there and use humor to talk about yourself. But you have to be willing to let somebody totally into you and what you think and your point of view of the world. And there's always opportunities. I don't care where you live, whether there are comedy clubs and you do open mics, whether you just tell all your friends, hey, meet me at this cafe this one night, I want to do some comedy, and they sit and listen to you. Whatever it is, comedy is not an art form that you can practice alone. Yeah. You need an audience. It's not playing an instrument. It's not anything else where you can kind of practice on your own and then present it. No, you actually need an audience or else it doesn't work. So, but there's opportunities everywhere. And if there's any young comedians who want to get involved in these kinds of things, they want to try some of these things, I am always happy to put them on stage. I hold a comedy festival in Dearborn. I hold a comedy festival in Palestine. Come to me. I will put you on stage. I will get you up there because there is no substitute for actually trying it. So I encourage people, because we have enough doctors and engineers. We need more comedians. So anybody wants to try it, I'm down.
I'll put Amer's phone number in the link for everyone.
Yeah, sure. Put for no problem. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much, Amer Zahr, for having this interview with us, educating us.
My pleasure.
About the art of comedy, man. Comedy is so powerful and awesome. I know me being a student, I don't call it a student of comedy, it's kind of lame, but being someone who loves comedy all the way back from Richard Pryor all the way till the modern day, you know, you learn so much about different people's heritage and culture and just other point of views through comedy. So this is an art form that's constantly evolving, and, you know, having someone like you represent us in this comedy game is so important. So thank you so much once again. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.